Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. This is another Friday stream of the Gameday flights, and today we're here in beautiful Spain. We're here in Seville today. We're going to be doing the Madrid derby this afternoon between Real Madrid and Atletico in Spain. One of the biggest rivalries in all Spanish footballs here. Huge matchup. Will have some massive implications in the table. So before we get started, I do want to say hello to everyone here. Super Typhon, good to see you. Hello, all the lurkers. I hope you guys are all doing well. So this is a pretty big game. Prior to this game, I do want to talk a little bit about the game itself. Coming into this matchup, of course, Real Madrid being one of the top teams in Spain this year, second place in Spain, won their last two matches. They're just only 4 points behind FC Barcelona, who's first. Atletico, on the other hand, has won 4 of their last 5 matches at third place. And, of course, the last time these two clubs have met in the Madrid derby, it was absolute domination from Atletico Madrid, who completely dominated their first meeting 5-2 at the Metropolitano. So big game coming up here between these two sides. But yes, Atletico and Real Madrid, one of the biggest games in Spanish football. So huge matchup today. La Liga is always an interesting league to talk about, of course. So let's go over our little nav map then for our flight plan this afternoon. So of course, 5500 will be our first leg. We're going to be taking off here in Seville. From Seville, we're going to head up east. We're going to check out the Estadio Benito Villamarín, the home of Seville's very own Real Betis. Is Real Betis' home ground at the Benito Villamarín. Then from there, we'll enter into Seville's home ground at the Estadio Ramon Sanchez Pizjuan, home of Seville FC, the 7-time Europa League champions. Then we're going to fly into downtown Seville and check out the scenery up here. We'll mainly visit the Plaza de España. And of course, the famous Alcaraz and the Cathedral of Sevilla. We'll check out the Alcaraz and the Cathedral. Then we'll head up northwest through downtown. We'll make it to the current home for Real Betis, the temporary home of Real Betis, at the Estadio La Cartua. And then we'll head east over to, then we'll head further east into Cordoba. And we'll make our way over to Cordoba. We'll check out the Mosque Cathedral in Cordoba. And then we'll go ahead to our first stop of the day here in Lima Echo Foxtrot Charlie. That'll be our first stop of the day. Leg 2, this is a 2-legged flight. We'll head up all the way to Toledo, the historic city of Toledo. We'll fly around this area for a bit. Then we'll head northeast and we'll get our way into Madrid. We'll go into the neighborhoods of Leganés for the Estadio On-Time Butarque. Then we're going to go to Getafe for the Coliseum. Then we'll fly our way into the Estadio de Vallecas, the home of Rayo Vallecano. Then we'll fly ahead into downtown Madrid. We'll be flying through downtown. We'll go into the Royal Palace here in the Temple de Debod. Then we'll fly our way into the Estadio de Bernabeu, home of Real Madrid, the legendary home of Real Madrid, and finally we'll head over east to the Metropolitano, home of Atletico Madrid, and then we'll make our stop at Barajas Airport, the main airport of Madrid. So yeah, we got quite a bit of flying here to do this afternoon. We'll take the S-Cub. No big wheels, just smaller wheels. We don't really need big wheels for this part of the flight. So that's what we're taking here today. So So that is where we're going to be at today. So we're going to be in Seville. By the way, Seville, by the way, if you guys don't know about our first city, Seville is Spain's largest city in Andalusia, with 686,000. It's the fifth largest city in Spain. This city is a very old one. It was founded back during the Roman times as Hispalis. Then, after the Islamic conquest, it became known as Ishbilia. And this became the center of the Caliphate or Cordoba. But Seville has rich history, of course. And there are tons of landmarks here in Seville. It is 2 million visitors visited in 2018, making it the third most visited city in Spain. And much of the historic monuments are in the historic center. And the most famous landmark is the Cathedral of Seville, the largest Gothic cathedral in the world, and one of the world's largest cathedrals, dating back all the way in the 12th century, originally as a former mosque. But this city was huge. You also have the Alcazar of Seville, the royal palace, and one of the official residences of the royal family here in Spain. Of course, you have the very famous Plaza de España. Absolutely stunning. We have some amazing sights. And of course, like many other Spanish cities, Seville has rich culture between many of its theaters, the Holy Week, Semana Santa, which is a massive festival. And of course, you can't forget about flamenco. Seville might be one of the birthplaces of the flamenco. So, huge part. It's got a rich culinary scene with tapas, of course. But another big part about Seville, of course, is sports. And there are two big clubs here in the city. Those two big clubs, you have the more successful Sevilla FC, the more successful of the two clubs here in Seville, with their 7 Europa League titles. The other one is one of the most loyal and diehard clubs in all of Spain, Real Betis, also known as the Heliopolitanos. But Real Betis are actually one of the most supported clubs in Spain. So lots of tradition and history in this part of the world, of course. So we'll fly down to the Estadio Benito Villamarín, big home of Real Betis. Fun fact about Real Betis, by the way, they were actually founded in 1907 as they separated from Seville FC after a split. Real Betis, of course, has been a quite successful club. They've won a La Liga title in 1935, and they won the Copa del Rey trophy 3 times here in Spain. So yeah, this is their home, the Benito Villamarín. Of course, this was taken before the renovation work, but as of when the stadium got renovated, it went to 60,000 people, which is huge. It's actually bigger than Sevilla FC's stadium, which is crazy considering Sevilla has been the more successful club here in the city, of course. But one very interesting thing, though, about Sevilla and Real Betis, of course, is their rivalry, known as the Seville Derby, El Derby Sevillano, or simply known as El Gran Derby. And it's one of the most passionate derbies in Spanish football. And trust me, we will definitely cover this in a later series because, trust me, if you've never seen that derby before, this is easily one of the most passionate rivalries in Spanish football. And both clubs do not like each other at all. They absolutely hate each other. So we'll turn west. We'll get into the Alcazar, of course. But yes, I'm hand flying this for a little bit before we go to the autopilot. But very passionate derby. It's never bored. It's probably considered by some people as probably the best derby in Spain in terms of fan passion and stuff. It's pretty much unprecedented in Spain. So this here is the Cathedral of Seville, the Seville Cathedral. Seville Cathedral, absolutely gorgeous. It's absolutely massive, of course. There's the Alcazar around here too, the Alcazar. So there's the Alcazar Seville. And finally, of course, we get to the Plaza de España. Which is right here. Is the Plaza de España. And that is a massive plaza, though. Well, we're getting a little close. Plaza de España, absolutely gorgeous place. Seville is an incredible city, of course. So we'll head our way over to Hey, Perico Alda, good to see you, my dude. I hope you're doing well. Yes, that game was where you at prom. I hope you have a great time at prom, Perico Alda. We're doing the Madrid Derby today. We actually start in Sevilla. Absolutely, really historically huge city. It's a very visited city, of course. Seville is a really neat place to visit. We ended up visiting both the Benito Villamarin Stadium. We then checked out the Sanchez Pizjuan, and now we're going to Parjua. And yes, this is before the renovations at the stadium, and that was when it still had its running track. So we're just basically getting to Madrid. Yeah, it's definitely not a great stadium. It's definitely inferior. Hey, Dev, good to see you, my dude. Yeah, it looks like a mall in Texas. No worries, Perico. I hope you have a good time at prom and see you soon, okay? So we're going to be cruising to 1500. So once we get to 1500, we're going to talk a bit about, we're going to start on the Madrid Derby between Atletico and Real Madrid. This was definitely the biggest match of the weekend, considering, it's Spain's second biggest rivalry in Spain, and there really wasn't very many big games this Sunday, of course, from other teams. So this was pretty much the obvious choice. There wasn't really any. It was either this one or Newcastle Sunderland, which was very good. But we've been in the UK recently quite a bit, so I want to get back to Spain. So definitely a very big deal, of course. So speaking of which, of course, some of the other stuff that's happened over the week, the Champions League actually got its first round knockouts been complete on Tuesday and Wednesday. On Tuesday, Unbelievably, the first match of that day was Sporting Bodo Glimt. And despite being 3-0 down after the first leg, Sporting Lisbon got 5 goals in the game. They didn't give up any, and they won 5-0. So Sporting Lisbon's into the knockout stage. Poor Bodo Glimt, they absolutely choked in Lisbon. Then Arsenal Leverkusen ended with Arsenal getting a 2-0 win to put them up 3-1 in aggregate, and Arsenal are moving to the next round, which should be a surprise. Then, of course, PSG Chelsea. PSG absolutely crushed Chelsea at Stamford Bridge to finish 8-2 on aggregate. PSG, the defending Champions League winners, are going to move on. Then, of course, we have Real Madrid and Man City. And Real Madrid, Vinny Jr. got the 2 big goals to put them 5-1 aggregate against Manchester City. Big for those teams. And then the other part of the teams that went to the knockout stage, Barcelona absolutely annihilated Newcastle. 7-2. They absolutely annihilated Newcastle United. It wasn't even fair. I mean, Rafinha got 2, Lewandowski got 2, Fermin Lopez got 1. And of course, the other goals were Bruno scored 1, and Lamine Yamal got 1 as well. But it was complete annihilation from Barcelona. They finished 8-3 aggregate. But at least, but it's not nearly as bad as Bayern and Atalanta. 4-1 win for Bayern, and they went 2-2 in aggregate. Atlanta never had a chance. Then Liverpool and Galatasaray at Anfield, despite being down 1-0 to Galatasaray, they put 4 goals at Anfield, and Liverpool have done it again. Another European night at Anfield, of course. And finally, Spurs and Atletico. While Spurs did win that game 3-2, it didn't matter. The aggregate was in Atletico's favor. So that concludes a bit of the Champions League knockout. And that means our quarterfinals, PSG Liverpool. That's going to be a good one. Real Madrid and Bayern once again. Once again, these two have met. Barcelona and Atletico, and Sporting versus Arsenal. Should be pretty tough. If I'm going to pick the quarterfinals, I have PSG beating Liverpool. And then I have Bayern Munich beating Real Madrid. And then Barcelona Atletico Madrid is Barcelona. They've been unbelievable. So I think Barca's going to win on aggregate. And finally, for Sporting and Arsenal, I have the Gunners getting past it. So court semifinals predicted would be PSG Bayern and Barcelona versus Arsenal. Big games. Big games on the schedule, of course. So let's go over our slideshow for today, the Madrid Derby. Let's get started with this. The Madrid Derby, also known as the El Derby Madrileno, given between matches of Atletico and Real Madrid, both hailing from the capital city. And while originally terms for those fixtures held in the Spanish League, it's now been generalized and to include every match, especially in tournaments like the Champions League, Copa del Rey, and Super Cup de España. One of the most interesting meetings, of course, was the 2014 Champions League final, making it the first time 2 clubs from the same city had even played in the Champions League finals. And they've also met again in the 2016 Champions League final in Milan. That's right. This Spanish Derby happened in the Champions League final before El Clasico ever did, which is pretty crazy to think about, of course. But the history of this derby, by the way, and these 2 matchups, of course, start back in the 20th century. When Madrid Football Club, aka Real Madrid, was founded in 1902, the most powerful club in the capital, kept on making mergers and acquisitions of the best smaller clubs in the city, which subsequently disappeared. And they signed the best player from those clubs that it did not absorb, which made those clubs defunct when they were unable to compete against Real Madrid. However, there was one exception to this. Athletic Club Madrid. Yes, Athletic Club Madrid was what they were originally called, because at the time they were actually founded to keep their best players thanks to the financial aid of their parent club, Athletic Club Bilbao. So yes, it turns out that Real Atletico was founded by the financial aid of Athletic Club. Pretty hilarious to think about it. As a result, many supporters of the clubs that advanced due to Real Madrid became big supporters of the Red and Whites, harboring dislike towards the royal club of Real Madrid, and that triggered much of the rivalry between these two clubs, of course. Of course, after the Spanish Civil War and during the early Franco's period, Atletico Madrid became associated with the military air force and were renamed at the time to Atletico Aviación. And although the alleged preference of the regime for the club is subject to discussion, as after winning the first title in 1940, Atletico's coach at the time, Ricardo Zamora, was jailed due to the fact of charges of being a communist. In any case, during this period, Atletico Madrid became the most successful club in Spain, reducing the historical gap between the two clubs until the regime preference shifted towards Real Madrid in the 50s, as Franco sought to make political capital of Real Madrid's multiple European Cup titles at the time, when Spain was internationally isolated, because, well, Franco was a dictator, and honestly, he wanted more recognition, which is why he supported Real Madrid. Due to that, of course. But the rivalry first gained international attention back in 1959 during the European Cup at the time, when they first met in the semifinals in European competition. Real Madrid won the first leg 2-1 at the Bernabeu, while Atletico won 1-0 at the Metropolitano, and eventually went to a replay, which Real Madrid won 2-1 to advance to the European Cup finals. Of course, Atletico got some revenge when Atletico, led by their rival coach at the time, defeated the rivals in two Copa del Rey finals in 1960 and 1961. In the 70s, Atletico once again took the lead as the most successful Spanish club of the decade, which prompted the Real Madrid fanbase to look down at Atletico, calling them and their supporters Indios, which is Indians, as a reference to the Latin American players that were signed by the Red and Whites at the time, which ends up becoming a big nickname, of course. Of course, one very big thing in the modern era, the Madrid Derby is the second biggest derby in Spanish football, behind the El Clasico, obviously. We'll get to El Clasico in this year's series. And although Real Madrid have a larger worldwide fan base, Atletico Madrid has also amassed a significant fan base due to their level of success in the Champions League and Europa Leagues. Of course, Real Madrid are the most successful club in Europe, having won 15 Champions Leagues. But Atletico's come close twice. The only issue was Real Madrid stopped both of those attempts. And in 2019, Real Madrid and Atletico faced off in an off-season exhibition match, making it the first time the two clubs faced off in a Madrid derby outside their home country in the US, in which Atletico Madrid routed their royal rivals 7-3. And that's a bit about the history in terms of the derby matchup, of course, between these two clubs. In terms of wins of the 242 matches these two clubs face, Real Madrid have been the more dominant club in the derby with 118 wins, 63 draws, and Atletico won 61 games. So Atletico has been the least successful of the two, obviously. But that being said, Atletico Madrid do have a lot of determination, of course. So that concludes a bit about the history of the Madrid Derby and the history of these two rivals, of course. These two bitter rivals in Spain, obviously. So big, big stuff. Of course, some of the other stuff that's happening this weekend, other major football matches this weekend. Of course, some other big games this weekend. Saturday is going to be Everton and Chelsea. Should be a pretty important matchup in England, obviously. We also have several MLS matches as well for the MLS. Another big game going on in Germany on Saturday. Dortmund versus Hamburger. Hamburger SV, of course. Big game, obviously. Here in Germany, is obvious. I almost did consider the Sao Paulo Palmeiras matchup, but I ultimately went with Madrid Derby. I want to be back in Spain, of course. And then Sunday, we have some other matchups, of course, on Sunday. Obviously, the Time Wear Derby should be a good one with Newcastle and Sunderland. That should be a fun matchup. Italy has Bologna and Lazio. That one's probably the best one in Italy this weekend. Germany has Mons and Frankfurt. Of course, France has got some interesting matchups. Lyon and AS Monaco. Marseille and Lille are some pretty great matchups as well. And then Braga and Porto is another pretty good one as well. Some pretty neat matchups, of course, getting into the league, obviously. So those are some of the big soccer matches this week. Also, the college basketball tournament has just started. March Madness just started as well. If you guys don't know about March Madness, it's college basketball, obviously. And that might be April 4th, depending on what you're asking for. But Louisville beat South Florida in their first round. Big win for the Cardinals. They'll be taking on Michigan State next. Should be a big one. Nebraska also won its first ever tournament game last night. Their first ever NCAA tournament win ever for Nebraska. We did have a few upsets. Mainly the big upset, of course. This weekend, of course, the big upset was High Point beating Wisconsin. Big win for High Point, the 12th seed. We also got another lower seed win. Texas beats. Texas was able to successfully knock off BYU. And VCU knocked out North Carolina. Some pretty exciting games, of course. But we got some more games tonight, of course. Senna managed to keep up with Duke for pretty much most of the game yesterday as well. So I'm curious what kind of upsets and what kind of chaos that's going to be bringing this week. Speaking of which, I heard some of the games are actually already on, of course. Let's see. Kentucky and Santa Clara right now. So pretty big stuff going on here, of course. Some big tournament games, obviously. Also, baseball is going to be starting next week. And speaking of baseball next week, is opening day next week for both in the United States and in Japanese baseball. And yes, America did not win the World Baseball Classic because guess what? The World Baseball Classic winners were Venezuela. So, congrats to the Venezuelans for winning the World Baseball Classic. And finally, guys, for next week, it is a baseball stream next week since there isn't really much soccer matches going on. We're doing baseball. But here's the thing, though. This baseball stream is not going to be in the United States, actually. It's going to be in Japan, actually. We're going to be doing the Hanshin Tigers and the Yomiuri Giants, which if you guys don't know about these two clubs, these are the two most historic clubs in Japanese baseball. These two clubs are two of the most historic clubs in Japan. One is the most successful club in Japan, the Yomiuri Giants. The other, the Hanshin Tigers, are one of the oldest baseball clubs in Japan, dating back to 1936. And of course, very historic clubs and very historic clubs with some historic talents over the years. So I can't wait to talk about some Japanese baseball, and I'll even talk a little bit briefly about how things in Japan play out a bit differently from the United States. I'm probably interested in talking to you guys about the structure of the league, the history, some of the expat players that have had success in Japan, and all that too, and some of the champions and stuff as well. But some very interesting stuff, of course. But Japanese baseball is really, really interesting. But some really cool stuff. But really neat stuff, though. Baseball in Japan is quite different from the United States. Hey, good to see you, Lord Blackguard. I hope you're doing well. So we're going to be heading to Cordoba soon for the first leg. So we'll talk a bit briefly about Atletico Madrid. We'll get started with Atletico. The Red Whites of Madrid, of course. Atletico is one of Spain's more historic clubs, founded back in 1903. As Athletic Club Sucursal de Madrid, which is actually a branch of Athletic Club Bilbao. They play at the Metropolitano, which seats up to 70,000 people. They eventually merged with the Club Aviation Nacional in 1939 and became Atletico de Madrid in 1946. Of course, in 1987, the club became an SAD. Of course, the club's traditional kits are very famous in Spain for their traditional red, white vertical stripes and blue shorts. Followers of Atletico Madrid were nicknamed the Colchoneros, which is known as the mattress makers, Indians, because of the Latin American players they signed back in the day, and the Rojiblancos, their most famous nickname, the Rojiblancos, the Red Whites. And one very famous club president, honorary club president, was King Felipe VI. Yes, the King of Spain currently is an honorary president of the club. In terms of success, they are one of the most successful. 11 La Liga titles, which is third. 10 Copa del Reyes, 2 Spanish Super Cups, the President Cup in Spain, a Copa Eva Duarte for the royal family, and of course they've also won numerous European titles, the Cup Winners' Cup in 1962, 3-time Europa League champions in 2010, 2012, and 2018, 3-time Super Cup titles in those same years, and they even won the 1974 Intercontinental Cup. And they made the finals of the Champions League 3 times, though they never won it, making them one of the most successful clubs in Europe to have never won a Champions League. So, a very historic club. Atletico, rich in passion and fans, obviously. Atletico's a really proud club. I'm doing very well, Lord Blackheart. I'm very excited to get this stream underway, to be back with the streaming stuff again. And it's be great to be here with the community once again on Friday. I am tempted to make a new stream, obviously. I don't know what I want to do with it. But I'm very excited to be here, of course, as always. So we'll be going here as well. So next slide is going to be the colors and badge of Atletico Madrid. Now, their colors, of course, the famous red and white vertical striped shirts, blue shorts, and blue and red socks, and they've been used, this combination has been used ever since 1910, which is their proud team colors, of course. Now, the badge itself was introduced in 1917, which featured the coat of arms of Madrid, which is actually the picture you guys see here, is the coat of arms of Madrid, is on your picture to the right of the slide. Now, the story about the coat of arms of Madrid, this features a bear, mainly an Iberian brown bear, and in the strawberry tree, which is native to this area, and they've been dating back since the Middle Ages, of course. And yet, apparently the story of how this went was around the 13th century. And they apparently saw a bear stand on fours, stand on its hind legs, lean on a tree in the council representations, underpin the control of timber by the council, and it's still to this day. And this basically has been around the same design since 1222. So yeah, very old coat of arms, and it's still in Madrid, which is pretty cool. A pretty cool badge, of course. And that's the one you see here. They did change the logo back in 2016, which is remodeled. However, then they reverted back to their old badge in 2024. So, but very historic club, of course. The coat of arms, by the way, is on the top left corner of the logo. Really neat stuff. Of course, now they play at the Metropolitano Stadium here. Now, this stadium here, the Metropolitano, has been their home stadium since 2017, and it was originally built when Madrid tried to host the World Athletics Championship in 1997, and it was closed back in 2004 due to their bid for the 2016 Olympics being unsuccessful. However, this stadium was completely rebuilt and was reopened to the public in 2017 to replace their old ground that used to be here. Their old ground, by the way, was the Calderon. Vicente Calderon Stadium was their old ground. But this is one of the nicest stadiums in Europe. The seating capacity had 20,000 people from its closure, but with its reopening, it went all the way up to 68,000. And then it was extended even more to 70,000 people, which is crazy to see how many more people built in that stadium. But it's a fantastic ground, though. The atmosphere is supposed to be excellent in this stadium. They hosted quite a few events. They've hosted a few Champions League games, including the Champions League finals in 2018. They also hosted it's hosted Copa del Rey finals. It's hosted a Champions League final in 2019, and it's even hosted plenty of concerts here too. Plenty of concerts have held their way into the home ground, but really neat place. Atletico Madrid have such a really great stadium, one of the best in Spain. So in terms of supporters, of course, Atletico Madrid have had some great supporters, of course. Frente Atletico is an ultra group founded in 1982, and they had around 2,500 members and one of the largest ultra groups in Spanish football. However, in 2014, they were expelled by Atletico. But there are plenty of supporters, celebrity supporters of the club, including those of Joaquin Sabina, Javier Bardem, Rosendo Mercado, but also international supporters. Harrison Ford supports the club. Will Smith, Halle Berry, Tom Cruise, Travis Kelce, Vin Diesel, Patrick Mahomes, and Carl Anthony Towns are all fans of Atletico Madrid. So they got quite a bit of international support. And they're one of the most popular sports clubs in the world with a large international fan base. As of 2025, they were ranked 16th at the top 20 most popular sports clubs on Instagram in the world. huge fan base. Atletico has. Hello, C Guy, but I hope you're doing okay. But I think it's a bot. So Mons, if this is a bot, you do something about it, okay? So we're going to be entering Cordoba. We'll get back to the slide again a little bit, but this is Cordoba. But Cordoba, really interesting city. It's Spain's 12th largest city with 324,000. Of course, it was once a Roman colony. It became a major center during the Umayyad dynasty and transformed this city into a center of education learning. And at one point, it became the second largest city in all of Europe. Of course, with all the political crises and stuff, Cordoba was then recaptured by the Christians in 1236. However, the most famous landmark by far, Cordoba's most notable landmark, is the Mosque Cathedral, which was built all the way back in 1236. It was dedicated in 1236. It was constructed in 1785, and it was continued to be built multiple times as well. But one of the unique things about this Mosque Cathedral, of course, was the Islamic architecture and its Moorish architecture, and it's one of Spain's most historic monuments and tourist attractions. And it's a UNESCO World Heritage Site as well. So very important stuff. Cordoba also has its own sports football club, Cordoba's Club de Football. It founded back in 1954. And they play their home games at the Estadio Nuevo Arcangel with 25,000 seats. Pretty neat stuff, though. So pretty cool stuff. Oh, yeah, it happened before as well. Thank you, Typhon. Appreciate it. Yeah, I've been doing quite a bit of stuff. I've been trying to catch up to some of my airline stuff, obviously. So yeah, we should get to the Mosque Cathedral soon. I think it's on our right. We'll see the Mosque Cathedral. Yeah, can't miss it. There it is, the Mosque Cathedral. Cordoba's most famous landmark. Can't miss it. We'll put that there. There it is. There's the Mosque Cathedral. And there's the football stadium for Cordoba CF. There's their 25,000 seat stadium. And yes, I love Spanish football. I like watching La Liga. Probably because it's a lot easier to watch because all their games are on ESPN, which makes it much easier to keep track of. And we're going to climb up to 5,000 feet. So we're going to go ahead and start climbing. So we'll climb up to 5,000. So we'll get here too. So yeah, it's very big stuff going on as well. So very big stuff going on, of course. We get to climb up to Spain's absolutely gorgeous though. So I have plans if we do a Seville Derby sometime either this season or next year's La Liga. If we do the Seville Derby, we're gonna be starting probably in Alicante and Elche, and make our way down through the coast. We'll make our way through Mauritius, then we're gonna have some hills and scenery and stuff to make our way over to Granada, Granada, Malaga, and then fly our way into Seville. Let's see how that would work. So that would be pretty interesting though. We'll get to. But man, look at the scenery here today, guys. This is absolutely breathtaking scenery here in Spain. I'd like flying in this region, of course. I don't know if I'm thinking about doing this. I don't know. I could think about going back to 3 streams a week at some point in the future. Do 3 streams a week. And if that's the case, I could move the game day flights into Wednesday, of course. Move the game day stuff over to Wednesday, obviously. We'll still cover games for the weekend, of course. We'll do that, and then we'll still do that Wednesdays. Since Friday will be variety. If I do it, I'll do a variety stream. We'll do a mix of GA and airliner content. For example, one week we do general aviation, fly, and we just randomly fly wherever we want. And then maybe the next week we do some regional airline flights. I don't want to do super long airliner stuff, but maybe short-haul regional flights. With the 73, 777. I'm hoping to get the RJ as well for those really small airports. That would be a lot of fun. You could take off from some of the really small airports that we don't normally get to fly out of. That would be really cool. We could do some short-haul flights, obviously. That would be really neat. I think that would be cool. Just have a bit of mix of variety would be good to have. I'll still keep, and of course, Sunday will still be the National Park Series. That would be unchanged. And speaking of the National Park Series, we'll be covering Shenandoah National Park on Sunday. That will be our next stream, which would be Shenandoah National Park. Quite narrow, and we'll be flying east to Shenandoah across Virginia. We'll start North Carolina, and we'll make our way east through into Shenandoah National Park. And yes, there will be some bush landings, of course, in Shenandoah. Mainly we'll land at Old Rag Mountain. We'll land at the summit of Old Rag Mountain Summit. But yeah, Shenandoah should be a lot of fun. I'm excited to show you guys Shenandoah. In one small airliner. I'm hoping to get the Admiral RJ. I think I already have the 146, but I think the Avro would sound like a much better plane for me, considering the Avro has a bit more automation, which would make it easier for me to fly and do some of the stuff I like to do. Because I have the 736, 738, the 777. The Avro RJ would be a good fit, and then maybe I'll take some of the prop liners, the Sabru 40. I'll probably take that too, but I want to have a bit of variety as well. But I want to do some actual variety. And of course, if we do normal GA, I could probably have more variety in the flights and stuff. That's what I'm thinking about doing. I think that would be fun. Wednesday could still be the game day stuff. Maybe being the weekday would also be better, give us additional day or something for other stuff. That's just me. So we're going to go ahead and talk a little bit more about Atletico Madrid. Their main rival, of course, is Real Madrid, with their conflicting identities. Real Madrid have always been an establishment club. I mean, even more so once the regime in Franco in the 50s. Atletico was always more of a sense of rebellion, as they were originally associated with the Air Force, but ever since have become a more rebellious club. Of course, their other rival, by the way, is FC Barcelona, which is a pretty historic rival, as one of the classics of Spanish football. It was once lopsided in favor of Barcelona, however, it's now been competitive since the early 2010s, thanks to several important moments. The Champions League in 2016, which they upset Barcelona. Griezmann leaving Atletico Madrid to Barcelona in his return, and Luis Suarez to Atletico in 2020. However, by tradition and current affairs, the greatest rivalry exists with the Los Blancos. So that's definitely some pretty interesting stuff. And here's their club honors, by the way. Atletico Madrid have won the La Liga title 11 times in its career. It first won it back in 1939-40. Its most recent is 2020 and 2021. They did actually win a Segunda Division title once in 2002. Yes, they actually were relegated as recently as 2000. Copa del Rey titles, they've won 10 of them, which is the fourth most of any Spanish club. 2 Spanish Super Cups, a Copa President Cup, a Copa Eva Duarte Cup, and then Continental, you have your 3-time Europa League champions, the Cup Winners' Cup, 3-time Super Cup winners, and then worldwide they had the Intercontinental Cup in 1974, which they defeated Independiente, which might come up in a future series. In fact, it might come up in April. No guarantees, but there's that too. And finally, for our last slide dealing with Atletico for this leg, is their notable players. Of course, one of their most notable players nowadays is their historic team captain, Koke, is one of their most notable talents. He has played more games at Atletico Madrid than anyone else, 727 games for Atletico Madrid. He's pretty much a one-club man right now. He made his first team debut in 2009, and he played over 700 matches and helped them win 2 La Liga titles, 2 Europa League titles, and 2 Super Cups during his time at Atletico. And he was born and raised in Madrid too. Definitely a local guy as well, known for his versatility. He could play right, left, or central midfielder, and was known for his passing ability. But Koke, very historic player for Atletico Madrid. Then we have, of course, their all-time goal-scoring king, Antoine Griezmann, from Macon, France, one of the greatest players of his generation, known for versatility, game intelligence, attacking output, and off-ball attributes. He originally came from Real Sociedad, who we covered in the 2025 season with the Athletic Club, but Sociedad, he had a great time at Real Sociedad, but his prime was, of course, at Atletico Madrid. And this is actually currently his second stint at Atletico Madrid. He originally did transfer back to Barcelona in 2019, but he returned to the club in 2022. He wasn't just successful, not only was he successful for Atletico, he was also successful for France. He was a major piece in helping France win the 2018 World Cup, and became a major goal scorer for the French national team. But Griezmann, definitely a great talent, an excellent player. Then you have their great goalkeeper, John Oblak, one of the greatest goalkeepers in La Liga. the dude was an absolute menace. Originally came from Benfica, but then he joined Atletico in 2014 and hasn't looked back because the dude is an absolute menace. He's won the Ricardo Zamora Trophy 6 times, which is a record. He even was nominated for the Ballon d'Or award twice. But he's an excellent goalkeeper, one of the best goalkeepers in Spanish football. Absolute menace. Quick reflexes, agility, he's tall and athletic. Very amazing player. Then you also have Alejandro Rodriguez, who played from 1959 to 1976 for Atletico and helped them win 3 La Liga titles, 5 Copa del Reyes, and 2 major international trophies. The Cup Winners' Cup and the Intercontinental Cup. And was the second most capped player in Atletico's history. Very important player for their club. Then we have Luis Aragonés, their second leading goal scorer all time. Played for pretty much his entire career at Atletico during his later into the career. He also played for several other clubs, including Real Madrid. He did play for Real Madrid for a bit as well, but major piece of Atletico, long history with the club. Then you have their more recent star, Julian Alvarez. He's their most recent star. Then you have Tomas Renones. And there are quite a few more other talents, but these are just some of the most notable players Atletico Madrid have. If I gotta say their greatest player all time is, of course, I also mentioned Fernando Torres as well. Fernando Torres is El Nino. He was a big part of Atletico during their tougher times. And he was a huge star for Atletico, is Fernando Torres. Big star for the club. El Nino started at Atletico. He put some great numbers for the club during their tougher years. And then that was before his big transfer to Liverpool, then Chelsea, and then he returned back to Atletico Madrid again. But a legendary career, of course, for Fernando Torres. So that's basically Atletico Madrid in a nutshell. So that's Atletico Madrid, guys, the Red Whites. And if I had to pick between which of these two teams that if I were a supporter in Spain of the two Madrid clubs, I would take Atletico. I just don't like Real Madrid very much. Of course, here's the crazy thing about Atletico. Atletico Madrid actually have one of the longest term managers in Spain, actually. Also, Atletico Madrid was also one of the founders of La Liga back in 1929. So they're one of the few clubs that actually have remained near the top. Their manager, by the way, is Diego Simeone, who is also a well-known player at Atletico Madrid. He had 2 stints at the club. But of course, he's now been much more as a manager, and he's been the manager of Atletico Madrid since 2011. He's still the manager of Atletico. And the fact is, he's still manager of this club. He's been around Atletico for years. In fact, the crazy thing is about managers was since Diego Simeone's been manager, Real Madrid, however, have gone through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 managers since Diego Simeone was hired back at Atletico. 10 of them. But to be fair, Atletico is a whole different situation from Real Madrid. The expectations are just nowhere near as big. So we're doing quite well here so far. And don't worry, we'll get back to Real Madrid when we do El Clasico. We'll get back to it again once El Clasico happens. So, pretty cool things. So, so here we go. So, more mountain scenery, of course. So we're just very close to the first stop. So it's over the peak of this mountain we'll get to. Wait, no wait. Chuck Norris just passed away? Oh my gosh. Chuck Norris just passed away. That's crazy. So that's crazy. I never knew about that. So here we go, guys. Our first landing of the day here. An absolutely beautiful area here. So we'll land right here, of course. So we'll stay right here, of course. So we'll get ready to leave here soon. We'll have one last leg left to go into here as well. So we'll get ready for the second to last leg of the flight. So we'll get ready to make the flight. So here we go. We're going to be flying up to 5,500 feet. So 1,000 feet a minute. So here we go. Look at the landscape here. This is gorgeous. Wow, Spain is so nice to fly. Oh, what a beautiful, beautiful flight. Hmm. So we'll be climbing to 5,500 feet. So we'll start talking about Real Madrid once we climb to 5,500 feet. Let me check my fuel. Well, I'm going to go ahead and switch tanks. So we'll switch tanks here. We'll get to 5,500 feet. And then we'll start talking about Real Madrid. So we'll get our way up to. So 5,500 feet is about to come up very soon. So let's go ahead and talk about the other club in Madrid, the more famous of the two, Real Madrid. Real Madrid Club de Football, founded here in Spain, Madrid, dating back to 1902 Madrid Football Club. The club has traditionally wore its famous white home kit. The club was bestowed the title Real by King Alfonso XIII in 1920, and they play their home matches at the Bernabeu since 1947. However, unlike many European clubs, Real Madrid members of Real Madrid have actually owned and operated the club throughout its history. And it's one of the most widely supported clubs in the world, and the most followed sports club in social media, and it's the most valuable football club in the world when it was worth $6 billion. $6 billion worth, which is absolutely insane. I mean, the only clubs that could rival them in wealth was Manchester United, Barcelona, Liverpool, and Manchester City. But the crazy thing is, Real Madrid, in terms of all sports teams, here's the crazy thing. They're only 12th in terms of actual worth. That's right, they're below all the American teams. For example, the Dallas Cowboys is nearly $4 billion more valuable than Real Madrid. Which is pretty crazy to think about. In terms of their success, of course, Real Madrid is one of the most successful clubs in the world, and it's Europe's most decorated club in Europe. Domestically, this club has won 71 trophies, including a record 36 La Liga titles, 20 Copa del Reys, 13 Spanish Super Cups, a Copa Eva Duarte and Copa de la Liga, and internationally, they are the most decorated club in Europe. How about a record? And they've won 35 European trophies, including a record 15 Champions League titles. 15 of them. 6 UEFA Super Cups, 2 UEFA Cups, a joint record 2 Latin Cups, an Ibero-American Cup, and 9 World Championships, which is a record. And they have been in UEFA, they're ranked first in all-time clubs in Europe. And oh yeah, one more thing. Real Madrid have never been relegated. No, seriously, they have never been relegated at all, making them one of 3 clubs in Spain to have never been relegated. And they're also, of course, was recognized as the greatest football club of the 20th century by FIFA. So, yeah, Real Madrid is just a very special club. In terms of nicknames, of course, they have several of them. Los Blancos, the Whites, Los Mariners, the Mariners, La Casa Blanca, the White House, Reyes de Europa, the King of Europe, and their supporters are known as the Madridistas. That's their nickname, of course. But yeah, this is a club with extremely rich history in Spanish football, of course. So in terms of crest and colors, here's one of their original logos back in 1920. This was their first year of their Real title, of course. The first crest had a very simple design at the time, with the decorative interlacing of the club initials, MCF. However, their first crest changed in 1908, which serves as the basis for the rest of their time, when the letters adopted a more streamlined form and appeared inside of a circle. And this has been pretty much the trend of every single Real Madrid logo since 1908. And the final piece of that logo was the crown that was added on top of the logo in 1920, which is the one we see here. And the club style itself as Club Real Madrid Club de Football. Of course, during the Republican years and the monarchy's dissolution in 1931, the crown was actually eliminated and the title of Real was gone and now became Madrid Club de Football. Though, of course, after the Spanish Civil War, with the Nationals victorious, the royal title has been restored. And the club added the stripe of Castile as well, making it, and it's been pretty much that way ever since. Of course, for the team colors, Real Madrid has always maintained its white shirt for its history. However, there was one season in 1926 where the both shorts and shirt weren't even white. And it was because of they wore black shorts to replicate the English team Corinthian, which was one of the most famous teams at the time. But of course, it only lasted 1 year. After they were lost in the 1926 Copa del Rey, they returned to all white, and it's been that way ever since. And the Lone Marin inks, in fact, Real Madrid's dominance inspired Leeds United to switch their blue shirt for a white one in order to emulate Real Madrid. Of course, their away kits are mainly either all blue or all purple, have been their away kits. So that's kind of been how Real Madrid have their kits and how it looks. But yeah, their white kit is one of the most famous in all sports. In terms of grounds, of course, they play one of the most famous stadiums in football, in world football, the Bernabeu. This legendary stadium has a seating capacity of 83,000, following its renovation in 2024, making it the second largest stadium in Spain, behind, of course, their rivals, the Camp Nou in Barcelona. Named after the footballer and Real Madrid's legendary president, Santiago Bernabeu, the stadium is one of the world's most famous football venues. It's hosted the Champions League final on 4 different occasions, and it also hosted the second leg of the Copa Libertadores finals, making it the only stadium to host both those competitions. It was formerly known as the Santiago Bernabeu Stadium, however, it's simply now known as the Bernabeu. Very historic stadium, of course. It was absolutely huge. At one point, it seated 125,000 people at one point in the 50s, which was absolutely insane. 125,000 individuals. They did do a massive renovation project that started in 2017 and ended in 2024. And the new update got a retractable roof, modern video boards, and transformed to a global icon. And of course, its architecture is pretty unique too. And it's not just football. Not only do they host soccer matches here, they've hosted American football matches. And its first NFL game actually hosted just last year, November 16, 2025, with the Dolphins and Commanders. And then it's going to host one next year with the Atlanta Falcons, and they'll be announcing what their opponent is for the 2026 season. And of course, it's hosted plenty of concerts. The Bernabeu has hosted plenty of those too. Huge, huge stuff, of course. Of course, Real Madrid have massive amounts of supporters all over the globe. During most home matches, majority of seats in the stadium are occupied by season ticket holders, which are capped to be 65,000. In order to become a season ticket holder, one must first be a club member. In addition to members, the club has more than 18,000 peñas, which is club supporter groups, in Spain and around the globe. Real Madrid is the second highest average all-time attendance in Spanish football and attracts more than 74,000 fans to the Bernabeu, and are one of the best supported teams globally, which becomes the first team to reach 100 million fans on Facebook in 2017. Of course, their most hardcore supporters are the so-called Ultras Serfs, or simply Ultras. They are infamously known for their extreme right-wing politics, similar to Barcelona's infamous Boizos Noise. And of course, they've been so controversial that Future Press had to ban them and signed their seats to the general public, which some people thought was controversial. As well. So big stuff here. They definitely have wide support all over the globe. In terms of their rivalries, obviously, at Real Madrid have two very big ones. Of course, there is the Atletico Madrid rivalry. However, there are three other big ones I do want to talk about. Obviously, El Clasico is the most obvious. It's the biggest rival for Real Madrid is Barcelona. Is El Clasico, representing the two sides of not just Castile and Catalonia, but the two cities. And these two are historically pretty bitter rivals. Huge matchups, of course. As well. Of course, another rival's Athletic Club Bilbao, the El Viejo Classic, the old classic because they were dominant in the first half of the 20th century, and they even met in 9 Copa del Rey finals. Though nowadays it's not nearly as big, considering considered to be a competitive rival to Real Madrid. That being said, they're still very important culturally and historical significance. And finally, their biggest European rival is Bayern Munich. They played in 26 matches together, and now they're going to be playing 27 and 28 matches against each other this year. And even though they never met in the final, they have been very important. It's one of the biggest matches in Europe. And finally, of course, their other European rivals, Juventus, which is another one that's often played a lot in Europe. It's Juventus of Italy. So here is their club honors, of course. Real Madrid are the most successful club in Spain. I mean, look at the honors speak for themselves. 36 La Liga titles dating back to 1931. They won it 36 times. The Copa del Rey they've won 20 times, the third of most of any Spanish club. There's the 13 Super Cups here in Spain. Most recently 2024. In Europe, there's the 15 Champions League, including a run of 5 straight Champions League triumphs, 5 consecutive Champions League victories in the mid-50s to 1960. Then, of course, 1965 and 66, then over 30 years of a drought, and then they become successful again during the late 20th and the 21st century so far. 15 of them. They also won the Europa League twice in back-to-back years. They've won the UEFA Cup twice. 6-time Super Cup winners. 2-time winner of the Latin Cup, and then worldwide, a record 5 FIFA Club World Cup titles. The Intercontinental Cup 3 times, which is a shared record. The Intercontinental Cup in 2024, and the Ibero-American Cup. And then a couple more regional titles back in the earlier days of Spanish football. And finally, the players. And where do I begin with the players? Where do I even begin with the legendary talents Real Madrid has had over the decades? Of course, for my generation, the most iconic talent of Real Madrid in my generation is Cristiano Ronaldo. I'd be surprised if you guys don't know about Cristiano Ronaldo. If you guys don't know about him, you're probably under a massive rock if you guys don't even know who Cristiano Ronaldo is. You guys will be living under a giant rock. Cristiano Ronaldo is one of the greatest talents the sport has ever seen, and the greatest goal scorer of all time. He hails all the way from Madeira in Portugal. And he has won so many careers. 5 Ballon d'Ors, 3-time Men's Player of the Year by UEFA, World's Best Player 5 times, and he's won 34 trophies throughout his entire career. And he's held many records in the Champions League, including most Champions League goals, assists, and more. And fun enough, he actually started his career back at Sporting Lisbon. Then he joined Manchester United and was a big part of Manchester United's success throughout the 2000s. However, his peak was when he joined Real Madrid back in 2009, when he signed a then record £80 million deal. And he was absolutely insane during his time at Real Madrid. He's won many Ballon d'Ors, and he was a big piece of Real Madrid's dominance of the Champions League back in the 2010s. Ronaldo was a huge, huge piece of that team. And that was before he eventually left to Juventus. But Cristiano Ronaldo was an absolute star. He could attack anywhere, wing, pitch, striker. His height, jumping ability, and more had made him an amazing aerial duel guy. And of course, the dude was extremely creative. Incredible ability. He became a scoring machine. Cristiano Ronaldo, one of the greatest players to ever put on a Real Madrid kit. Then, of course, and now if you look for the 20th century version of Ronaldo, you have Alfredo Di Stefano. Now, he's a really interesting player. He is Real Madrid's greatest player of the 20th century, and one of the greatest talents ever is Alfredo Di Stefano. Now, I talked about him briefly in River Plate during my stream about him, but he's considered to be the greatest Real Madrid player of all time. The Blonde Arrow. He born in Buenos Aires, made his way into Madrid after 1953, but he was probably the most invaluable player during Real Madrid's dominance in the 50s. Of course, he had some dominant years at Real Madrid, won a Ballon d'Or in 1957 and 1959. And the dude is an absolute legend. Of course, after his time in Barcelona at Real Madrid, he did leave to Espanyol. But the dude was incredible with his skill, stamina, versatility, creativity, vision, and versatility. The dude was an absolute menace at Real Madrid and definitely a beloved player for the club. Absolute legend. Then another player on the list is Iker Casillas. Iker Casillas, of course, is their greatest goalkeeper. Born in Spain, and he played for pretty much his entire career in Real Madrid until he left Real Madrid to Porto in 2015. But Casillas was an absolute menace of a goalkeeper, thanks to his athleticism and shot-stopping ability, and spent his entire career in Real Madrid and be one of the few players to achieve over 1,000 matches. And he became the most invaluable goalkeeper, winning 5 La Liga titles, 2 Copa del Reys, and 3 Champions League during his time at Real Madrid. He spent 25 years with the club until he joined Porto on a free transfer. And he's not just great for Spain, he was also a great international keeper too for Spain. But absolutely incredible goalkeeper. Then we have Karim Benzema. We have Raul, who's actually the player who's played more games at Real Madrid than any other player. One of the great strikers ever, and he played for Real Madrid from 1994 to 2010. 220 league goals for Real Madrid, and helped the Los Blancos win 6 La Liga titles, 4 Super Cups, and of course was a big part of their success throughout pretty much the 2000s as well in 2010. After his time at Real Madrid, he played for Schalke, and then Al Sadd, and then returned for his final years with the New York Cosmos. But one of the greatest goal scorers of all time, an amazing striker. Then we have Karim Benzema, who's their second leading goal scorer, and he definitely has been one of the greatest French talents ever. Thanks to his technical skills, vision, and versatility. He was born in Lyon. He originally started as a Lyon player, but of course, Benzema had a legendary career at Real Madrid. And he even won a Ballon d'Or back in 2023. Become the fifth French player to ever win the Ballon d'Or. It was a big piece of their Champions League run. It was a big piece of their Champions League squad. But was a big part of their Champions League triumph in the Champions League. So Karim Benzema, incredible talent. He's now at Al Hilal now. So definitely the entail of his career currently, but still a great talent. We also have the greatest Croatian player of all time, and of course, the greatest Croatian talent the game's ever seen, Luka Modric. The great Luka Modric of Croatia. Luka, he's spent some time at Tottenham Hotspur, started Dinamo Zagreb, but of course, he became a legendary midfielder during his time at Real Madrid, and he became an exceptional midfielder thanks to his versatility as a creative playmaker, his creative playmaking ability, pre-assist and build-up, and his position and his versatility made him an incredible talent. Then, of course, we have Roberto Carlos, amazing Brazilian talent, one of the greatest left back in the history of the sport. Then, of course, you have one of the current stars of Real Madrid, Kylian Mbappe, probably one of the top players in the world currently, Kylian Mbappe. And then you have one of the greatest defensive players of all time, Sergio Ramos. Played for Sevilla, but he became the backbone of Real Madrid's defense during his time at the club. And of course, there are many, many, many more legends to begin with. But what I'm trying to say is Real Madrid have so many legends to pick from. I don't even know where to begin. They are a legendary club with legendary talent. So that concludes Real Madrid, and that concludes the slides for today. So that concludes our slides for today. So before we get into Madrid, I do want to show you a few things, of course. We'll get to Toledo for a bit. So we'll be reaching our next waypoint, the city of Toledo. So we're going to get near to Toledo, of course, the city of Toledo in Spain. Toledo is one of the most historic cities in Spain. It developed into an important city of Hispania. Then it became the capital of the Visigoths, and then, of course, then it was into the Islamic world in the 11th century. And most importantly, too, this city was majorly part of many of the historical landmarks in the city. Toledo, of course, is famous for its sword making ability. The steel from here is very high quality. Of course, Toledo has many historic sites, but the most famous landmark is the Toledo Cathedral since 1088. Is the second biggest cathedral in the entire country, in fact, dating back all the way back to the 13th century. But there's also plenty of other historic buildings, including the Monastery de San Juan de Reyes from the 15th century, the tomb of St. Beatrice of Silva, who founded the Order of the Immaculate Conception, at the Monastery of the Conceptionist Nuns in Toledo, and the Castle of San Servando, the medieval castle on the banks of the Tagus River. So, we're going to start the city down a little bit lower to around 3,500 feet. We'll just descend 500 feet. So, we'll get to Toledo very soon. So, we'll make our way down there. So, we'll get ready pretty soon for the next waypoint, of course. So, we'll head down. So we'll be 3,500 feet for the rest of the way, of course. But yeah, the scenery here in Spain is absolutely gorgeous, of course. So we only have a little bit further. We're just 61 nautical miles out from our final stop here in Spain, in Madrid. So we'll head over east. So we'll turn east once we fly over Toledo. And then we'll finally head our way to the Spanish capital. So we're going to head to Toledo, very historic city, of course. So we'll get to Madrid pretty soon, of course. We'll be entering here soon, and we'll turn. So here it is, guys, the city of Toledo here in Spain. So this is the historic city of Toledo, just dead ahead of us. So here it is, Toledo. And we can see the Alcazar in the palace. Here it is, guys. The Royal Alcazar. So there it is. Now we're going to head over to Madrid. Turn right to 23 degrees. So we're going to fly into Madrid. So we're just about 51 nautical miles away. We'll get into downtown Madrid. But before we do that, let's talk about each of the clubs that will be. Let's visit the websites for each of the clubs. So let's start with Real Madrid, the most famous club in world football. Reject all. So this is Real Madrid. You click the top left. Yes, they have other sports, including basketball. They have a basketball part of the site too. Then there's the club that talks about the history. So if you go here, you can do history, and you can learn about their histories with both basketball history and football, of course. And it shows you what list of year they were. They won a Spanish Cup in 1905. If you go to 1920, where the league first started, 5 Spanish Cups. And then, of course, then you go to all the different European Cups. You can see all the different trophies they've won. And, of course, their history, the famous players. You can list some of the more, and they each have a name. So there's Ronaldo, Cristiano Ronaldo. So there's Cristiano Ronaldo. And there's their greatest player, Alfredo Di Stefano. The best player in the history of Real Madrid. Alfred, attack, defend, play well everywhere. Leader on the pitch. There's his history too. In addition to this as well, you can also go to the club and let's see. There's also the fan clubs too, and there are a lot of them. And of course, there are Madrid supporters here in the States too, because obviously there are lots of fan clubs. So you can find supporter clubs. Of course, there's tons of space. Let's do United States. United States. Search. So there's 24 of them here in the United States. There's ones in Atlanta. The closest ones I live is probably in Nashville. And then the second page, Chicago and Nashville would be the closest. So here, but yeah, we got supporters all the way from here. And here's the Bernabeu website of the Bernabeu. And of course, with Real Madrid, you can take the stadium tour for so you got all the different stuff. The Real Madrid Museum, the panoramic view of the stadium from inside, the dressing room, the guide tour, and a temporary visit room, so you can see the Bernabeu. So pretty cool stuff. And of course, the shop's got all sorts of stuff too. So you get all the different jerseys and stuff. Of course, there's their classic home jerseys and all that. You get shop of the different players. Mbappe's number 10's popular. Bellingham's popular for Jude Bellingham and a few others. They got different fashions and stuff. Of course, there's the good old scarves of Real Madrid, the classic white scarf. Pretty cool stuff. So that's Real Madrid. Now we're going to go to Atletico Madrid. Club Atletico de Madrid. So here it is, Atletico. Now, Atletico's a bit different. The red whites, of course. So you can look at the club itself. Here's their history, of course. So this talks about Atletico's history, of course. The famous red-white in 1911. Atletico go red and white. The Colchoneros. So there's their history and stuff. And all that. So rich histories, of course, of Atletico. There is the Fan Tour Museum. So if we click this, you get to visit the tour. So you can do this, and you get the 5% discount. And all that, you get to see all the stadium and stuff, of course, and there's plenty of experiences too. Which is pretty cool though too. As well, pretty area though, really great stadium, of course. Atletico, from what I've heard, has got a really nice museum and stuff too. And of course, the shop has got. They ship here in the States. But yeah, there's the famous red and white kits, of course. But yeah, the very famous red and whites of Atletico Madrid. So there's what their kit looks like. The famous red whites. Of course, they got their old retro stuff. They got their retro kits from the 80s, of course, the famous red whites. And obviously, as well, they got their scarves and stuff too. I like this one. This one's probably my favorite. It's striped. It's got the red white stripes of Atleti. But yeah, pretty cool. Atletico Madrid, pretty cool. So we'll see that. Okay, so that completes the last thing, and then one last thing we're going to talk about before we get to our final stop. Let's talk about Madrid for a bit. The capital city of Spain is the capital most populous city in the country with 3.4 million people. Its metro area is at a whopping 6.8 million people, making it the second largest city in the EU after Berlin, and the second largest metro area in the entire EU after Paris. Madrid dates back to a military post in the late 9th century. It was conquered by Christians in 1083, and it became a major part of a sizable town. However, what really grew was in 1561, as it became the permanent seat of the Hispanic monarchy, and the following centuries characterized by the reinforcement as a status as a central city for state building. Madrid's urban area is the second largest GDP in the EU. It's an Alpha World city, and this city has a lot of major areas for tourism. but its most famous landmarks include the Plaza Major, the Royal Palace of Madrid, and the Royal Theatre. You have the Buen Retiro Park, one of the largest city parks in the country. And of course, all the different sports and stuff. Madrid is an absolutely wonderful city. However, here's the thing though. In terms of tourism, though, Madrid kind of gets overlooked for tourism in Spain because Barcelona is obviously the more popular city for tourists. But that being said, I would love to visit Madrid. I think it would be a wonderful place to visit. It would be a wonderful place to visit in the country. So, absolutely wonderful place. Tons of great architecture, the museums. The cuisine here is really cool too. It has its own influences, but also from other regions as well. The most invalid dish of Madrid's cuisine is cocido madrileno, chickpea-based stew. And it's got a rich white nightlife heritage, classical music, and of course, sports are a big deal. Mainly football, because Madrid's a football city. It's basically as much of a football city in Spain as London is for the United Kingdom. In addition to the big two clubs of Real Madrid and Atletico, there are three other pretty important clubs in Spain. You have Rayo Vallecano, found in the Vallecas neighborhood. Unlike many other Spanish clubs, their fans are very left-wing fans. Then you have Getafe, which is the more recent of the major Madrid clubs, found back in 1983 at the Coliseum. And finally, Leganés from 1928 at the Butarque. But yeah, very important city, of course. Lots of stuff. It is also starting to host Formula One events here in Madrid again. So pretty cool. And finally, Madrid is home to Barajas Airport, which is the second largest in Europe in size, and Europe's fifth busiest airport dating back to 1931. Madrid's airport is huge. It's a massive airport, and it has routes from all over the globe. I mean, flies to Europe, North America, South America, the Middle East, Africa. It flies to everywhere but Australia. But Madrid is a major city here in Spain. You know, it almost became Firefly Air's hub twice in the recent memory. It was beat up by both Genoa and Dallas, so hopefully maybe the third time's the charm and we have a hub finally in Madrid. I would be really happy to have a hub in Madrid. I think it would be an amazing city to have a Firefly Air hub. I always like Madrid, plus I like to find some of the cities in Spain. Like Barcelona, Bilbao, Valencia. I would like to make it an all-Iberia hub, with all the Iberian destinations, the Canaries. That would be really cool to see. So we're gonna reduce the power of this thing just a little bit, so we can fly over the city a bit more scenically. So this is Leganés, home of CD Leganés. There's the Butarque. Pretty neat little stadium, of course. They actually did play in Louisville once, so there is the stadium for so there's Leganés' home ground. Pretty cool stuff. Just went a bit slower, of course. So here is Leganes' Coliseum, the home of this Coliseum, home of Getafe. Not really a well-liked club in Spain, probably because of Bordeaux' coaching, of course. Very anti-football coaching here in Spain. We're going to go ahead and shift left again. So, we'll be making our way over here. Then we're going to go Vallecas. So, we'll be making here pretty soon. So, we're doing well, guys. I appreciate you guys who stick around for the stream. Thank you guys so much for sticking around. So yeah, after the stream, of course, I'm going to do one last leg of that Shamrock Express flights from Dublin over to Washington. So that's going to probably take pretty much most of the rest of the day, of course. So here it is. Estadio Vallecas should be down below. So there's the Estadio Vallecas. So there's the Vallecas Stadium, home of Rayo Vallecano. So to our right is the historic center of Madrid. So this is the historic neighborhoods and everything. So we'll now head our way over to Here's the Royal Palace, everyone. So this here is the Royal Palace. For some reason, it's warped into the terrain, apparently. That's weird. So now we got 2 more pitch stops. Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 6, 7, 8. So the Bernabeu should be easy to spot. Right in front of us is the Santiago Bernabeu, the luxury home of Real Madrid. Of course, Hala Madrid, as they say. Gorgeous city, of course. Gorgeous, really interesting stadium, of course. And there's the Metropolitano right to our right. So that wouldn't be that. So yeah, there's the stadium at the there's Real Madrid's home ground. All nice and ready. And then finally, of course, we're going to head our right, and we'll turn right here, head down to the Metropolitano. And that will wrap up today's flight for the Madrid Derby. So we appreciate all you guys for being here this afternoon. So here's, guys, the Metropolitano, home of Atletico. And that's going to wrap up the stream here. We can land anywhere we want. So there it is, Atletico's home, the Metropolitano. So that's it. We're going to go ahead and turn left. We'll turn left and circle our way to the runway. So that'll be it, everyone. That'll be the end of the stream. So thank you guys so much for coming along on this Friday stream. We're here in Madrid Airport. I appreciate you guys for coming along with me today. So before we get started, of course, we're going to be rating my good friend and Bonnie's player. So we're going to rate his channel. So we'll be back on Sunday for Shenandoah National Park. So I hope you guys have a great start to your all's weekend, and see you guys soon. Take care, everyone, and have a great rest of your day. Goodbye, everyone.